They took everything from her. Then she snapped. The city's elite gathered under a shower of crystal and champagne, their laughter echoing through the grand ballroom. But in the center of it all, Elara stood frozen, the delicate stem of her glass threatening to shatter in her grip. On a giant screen behind the stage, a slideshow of her life's work played out, the culmination of a decade of sleepless nights and relentless ambition. It was the launch of Ethel, a revolutionary clean energy technology she had poured her very soul into. Yet, the man on stage, her fiancé and business partner, Julian, was accepting the applause, his name now solely attached to the project. He smiled, basking in the adoration of the crowd, completely oblivious to the storm brewing in the woman he was about to discard. A news alert buzzed on the phone of the guest beside her, the headline stark and brutal. Tech mogul Julian Thorne announces solo acquisition of Ethel Innovations, parting ways with co-founder Elara Vance. The room started to spin. This wasn't just a business deal. This was a heist of her entire existence. The betrayal was a venomous serpent, coiling around her heart and squeezing the air from her lungs. It wasn't just the company. It was the shared dreams whispered in the dead of night, the promises of a future built together. The way he'd held her hand and told her they were an unstoppable team. He had used her brilliance, her trust, her love, as stepping stones to climb to a throne he had no right to claim. Looking around, she saw the faces of investors she had personally convinced, friends who had celebrated her every milestone. Now, they offered Julian knowing smiles and congratulatory nods. They were all in on it. The whispers she dismissed as paranoia, the late-night meetings she wasn't invited to, the sudden password changes on shared servers, it all clicked into place with horrifying clarity. He hadn't just stolen her company. He had orchestrated a grand deception, turning her own world against her. He had made her a ghost in her own story. A single tear, hot and heavy with rage, traced a path down her cheek. The grief was suffocating, a physical weight pressing down on her. It was the death of a future she had meticulously planned, the murder of the trust she had so freely given. For a moment, all she wanted was to crumble, to let the floor swallow her whole and disappear from the public humiliation he had so masterfully staged. The applause felt like thunder, each clap a hammer blow against her fragile composure. She looked at Julian, his eyes scanning the crowd, not for her, but for the next hand to shake, the next back to pat. In that chilling moment, she realized the man she loved, the man she was going to marry in 2 months, had never truly existed. He was a phantom, a carefully constructed character designed to prey on her ambition and her heart. The pain was so profound, so absolute, it hollowed her out completely. But as the last dregs of her sorrow drained away, something else began to fill the void. It was cold, sharp, and terrifyingly clear. A decision formed in the ruins of her shattered heart, solidifying into something unbreakable. She would not be erased. She would not be a footnote in the story of his success. The scientist in her, the woman who solved impossible equations and bent the laws of physics to her will, took over. Every problem had a solution. Every action had an equal and opposite reaction. He thought he had taken everything, but he had overlooked one crucial variable. Her. She straightened her spine, the fragile tremble in her hands steadying into a firm resolve. He had started a war, and she would be the one to finish it. Let him have his moment, let him drink his champagne and toast to his victory. It would be the last taste of triumph he would ever know. Elara slipped out of the ballroom, a ghost leaving her own funeral. Over the next 6 months, she vanished from the public eye, her silence mistaken for defeat. But in the shadows, she was building. She called in favors from the few loyal engineers Julian had cast aside, worked from a cramped, anonymous lab, and lived on nothing but coffee and sheer force of will. She knew Ethel's design intimately, including the secret backdoors and fail-safes she had coded into its core. Contingencies she'd once joked were for a doomsday scenario. This was her doomsday. On the eve of Ethel's global launch, As Julian prepared to flip the switch that would make him one of the most powerful men in the world, Ilara sat at her own terminal, a ghost in his machine. With a few keystrokes, she activated her protocol. It didn't just shut down the system. It rewrote its primary function. Instead of diverting clean energy to the grid, Ethel began systematically siphoning fractional financial data from every corporation it was linked to, all of Julian's new powerful partners. As alarms blared in the Ethel control center and Julian's empire began to bleed data and money, Ilara initiated the final phase. She rerouted the stolen information not to a private account, but to every major news outlet and financial regulator on the planet, exposing a web of corruption and insider trading that implicated everyone who had celebrated Julian's theft. He hadn't just stolen her company. He had used it as the cornerstone for a massive criminal enterprise. The final email, sent from a secure server, went only to Julian. It contained a single file, a video of her in the lab, a calm, cold smile on her face. "You took everything," her voice echoed from his speakers, "but you forgot. I'm the one who built the cage." As federal agents swarmed his headquarters, Julian stared at the screen, a dawning horror on his face. But what he didn't know was that the data dump was just a distraction. What had she done with the core energy technology itself, and where was she planning to point all that power now that she had it back under her control?